Like we're live. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Foreman from Committee of 70. Thank you for joining us for another one of our interviews here on Election Day. I am thrilled to be with Lauren Vidas, the founder and principal of Enact Strategies. Thank you for joining us, Lauren.
Great to be here.
So I figured I gave just a little bit of background, but I'd love if you could introduce yourself to us and our viewers.
Sure. As Sam mentioned, my name is Lauren Vidas. I'm coming to you live from the Octavius Cato mural, which is particularly fitting this wonderful election day. I have a long experience in government. I worked in the Nutter administration and also worked for city council, was Obama's election protection director in 2012, and used all of that experience and those relationships I built to start my own government relations and public strategies firm, Enact Strategies. And I am a committee person in the 30th Ward and an avid election protection advocate.
Wonderful, thank you. And love you to tell us a little bit. I know you're a little bit involved with us, Committee of 70. Could you tell us how you got involved with C70?
Sure. I first encountered Committee of 70 when I joined city government back in 2008. And just appreciated all the work they did around creating an efficient and effective government, which I think benefits us all as residents. And most recently, I partnered with Committee 70 to create a guide to try to connect residents with their local government and really help them understand how government works. And fittingly enough, the guide is called How Philly Works, and you can find it on the Committee of 70 website. It covers everything from city council meetings to the executive branch to the city budget. And it's really meant to be an accessible tool to help people understand, how their tax dollars are spent, but also how they can advocate for the things that they care about in their communities.
Thank you, Lauren, for sharing. And just really a great tool. I recommend everyone use it. I used it in my civics class last year with my students, and it was really successful and really helpful. So I recommend it to everyone. So, it's election day. Let's pivot to that. We're going to see a lot of new faces on council this year. It's because of the slate of resignations due to the resign to run policy. So what does this mean for city council as a body having so many new members?
So just real quick for folks who may not be familiar, City Council has 17 members, 10 of them are district-based and 7 at large. And depending on how today turns out, at a minimum, we're looking at 8 council members who have fewer than 2 years experience. So I think this cuts both ways. One, we've lost a lot of institutional knowledge because, as you mentioned, a lot of folks resigned to run for mayor. But it also brings fresh ideas, fresh faces, and fresh energy to council. So I'm really excited to see what new ideas these folks have. A lot of returning council members who were elected in special elections, so they hopefully have their sea legs now, and will be advocating for some big policies and some big visions moving forward. I also think it means that the mayor, because there's such a young city council, whoever the mayor is after today, is going to have an opportunity to really kind of shape the agenda over the next 4 years because there are so many fresh faces on council.
So thank you for that. And I think that's really nice transition to another one of the questions I had prepared for this. So you mentioned the mayor of Philadelphia is going to elect his 100th mayor tonight. So what will the mayor need to do between now and January? Really make sure that they're hitting the ground running.
Yeah, so having served on the last administration's transition team, I don't think people really understand just how much work needs to happen between election day and inauguration. So there's 2 big things that really need to happen. Number one is hiring their cabinet and picking these leadership positions in the next administration. So that means things like managing director. They have an opportunity if they want to appoint new chiefs of police, a new fire chief, but also things like the finance director, the budget director, people responsible for the city's finances. So there's going to be a lot of hiring and leadership picking that happens, but also the mayor's going to have to jump right into the budget. The budget is usually presented to city council end of February, beginning of March. And for a $6 billion operating budget, there's a lot of work that needs to get done. So those are the 2 big things that the next mayor is going to have to focus on when they come into office.
And thanks for sharing. And I think this is another opportunity to really plug the How Philly Works guide. I know there's some budgetary information on there. So for anyone who wants more information about that. So we have a very competitive local general election for city council at-large races coming up. Can you explain voters' options in the at-large race?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there are 7 at-large seats, and under the charter, 5 of them are reserved for the majority party, 2 of them are reserved for the minority party. And up until 4 years ago, that typically meant 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans, just based on the Democratic voter registration advantage. The Working Families Party made a big push to win those minority seats, and they were 50% successful. They were able to elect Councilwoman Kendra Brooks. Then Councilman David O was a Republican who won the other seat. So right now, what we're looking at is essentially a 4-way race for those 2 minority seats, and it's between the 2 Working Family Parties members and the 2 Republican nominees. So that's really where it's going to be super tight coming into election night. When voters step into the voting booth, they have the choice to vote for 5 members. So they can vote all Democrat, or they could split it. They could vote 2 Democrat, 2 Republicans, 1 Working. They can split it any way they want, but you have the option to choose 5 at-large members from across any of the parties. The 5, it will likely be 5 Democrats due to the vote advantage, and then the 2 minority seats, we're waiting to see if it's going to be Working Families, Republicans, or a mix of the 2 like it was last time.
And that was really great rundown. Really appreciate the answer. So we're not just getting new city council people across the board. We are also electing, city council will be electing a new council president with the council president Clark stepping down. Could you explain the role of council president to those who might be unfamiliar?
Yeah, so council president is a leadership position within the body. It's not something that voters vote for. It's something that the body internally elects. And the council president position it's a very powerful position within the body. Essentially, they are in charge of assigning committee assignments to the members. They're in charge of each office's budget. Down to like what office members sit in. When a bill is introduced, the council president has to authorize a hearing on the bill. So the council president, in effect, has almost veto power over legislation that's introduced by other members. So it can be a very powerful position depending on how it's used. There are obviously conversations happening now. There's some people who have put their name in the ring for the position that are considered front runners for it. But the official vote won't happen until January at that stated meeting, and that's when the council president will be officially elected internally by the body.
Very helpful again. Thank you, Lauren. So you mentioned earlier your experience in kind of the transition periods, and I think that is very useful to viewers of the series. City Council only has 4 sessions left before winter recess, new City Council people coming in. So I was wondering if you could share some things we might be able to expect legislatively between now and then, and also what happens to all the legislation that doesn't get passed before the end of the year.
Great question, Sam. So I think the next 4 sessions, we're going to see a lot of housekeeping by City Council. And by that, I mean, they're going to pass a lot of the legislation that is needed from an administrative perspective. So for instance, something like the streets department needs an encroachment or things like that, the revision of lines and grades, zoning matters, all of that stuff that has to be done legislatively, authorizing land bank transfers has to be done through council. All of those type of what I consider kind of bureaucratic processes, I think the bulk number of bills that we're going to see passed before the end of the year are going to be those, because once council goes on the 6-week hiatus during its winter break, all that work has to kind of come to a standstill. So they're going to try to get all that done. I don't think we're going to see any major policy agenda items introduced or passed just because they don't have a ton of time, especially if it's a controversial issue. And the reason they don't have a ton of time is once the council session ends at the end of this year and a new body is sworn in, any legislation that is introduced and that has not been passed yet is deemed lapsed, meaning that if the council person wants that bill passed, they're going to have to reintroduce it during the next term.
Thank you so much. And kind of looking ahead, after the holidays, after kind of that recess period that we just discussed, the budget is going to be one of those big things coming up. So how can residents provide effective input on the budget and advocate for things they care about in these council processes?
So I think there's a couple of ways. Number one, your district council person is often a great person to first reach out to since you're a direct constituent, as well as the at-large council members. Two, I always suggest people, rather than go it alone, try to find a group that's already doing work on the issue. So if you are passionate about libraries and you are passionate about making sure that library hours are fully restored and things like that, you might want to pair up with the Friends of the Free Library, because they're going to be doing an advocacy outreach effort, and there's strength in numbers. The other thing that the city is trying to do is have a citizens budget process. So they're going to be holding public community meetings online virtually, where citizens can weigh in with their concerns and with their sort of funding requests and things like that. So that's another great way to have your voice heard in the budget process. Once the budget process officially kicks off, they'll have a series of public hearings where each department has to come before city council. And at the end of those hearings, there are a couple of days reserved for public testimony. So that's like kind of the final opportunity for you to come and advocate for what you want. But my advice is, don't wait until the end of the budget process to have your voice heard. Reach out early and often through your local council representatives, and try to participate in that administrative budget community outreach program.
Thank you so much for the wonderful insight and recommendations. I think you transitioned to the last question that I had, which is, and you already sort of touched on this a little bit, but how can residents get more involved in how government works? I kind of wrote the book a little bit on how government works. So how can people get involved in that?
Yeah, so my best piece of advice, so there's a couple ways you can do it. If you want to be more politically engaged, you should check out your local ward, whether you're Republican or Democrat. Each of us is represented by a local committee person as part of the ward system. And so that's like a great opportunity. I'm working the polls this morning. I had a couple people who are interested, especially with 2024 coming up, getting more politically involved. If you want to get more involved in the day-to-day of your neighborhood, you should check out your local RCO, your registered community organization. Every neighborhood has a registered community organization that does work, whether it's related to zoning and building and development. We're organizing park cleanups and things like that. That's a great place to get started as well. If you go to phila.gov, you can look up your local RCO and it has contact information. And that's how I got started in my neighborhood, was volunteering with my local RCO, SASNA, and also working with our local public school through the Friends group there. So if you have a particular issue you care about, there's probably a group that already exists that's working on it. And so it's just figuring out who's doing the work that you're interested in and connecting with them.
Great advice again. Thank you so much. So we're running towards the end of our allotted time here. So before I wrap things up, I just wanted to cede the floor to you. If there's anything else that you'd like to share on this election day here in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania.
Just that I hope everybody has the opportunity to go out and cast their vote, because democracy depends on participation from every single one of us. So I encourage people to go out and vote, harass your neighbors, make sure they vote, and let's try to drive turnout as high as possible today.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today and with me today. Just a reminder, everyone out there, if you need anything, any support with election day today, find your polling place, anything like that, any questions, you can visit 70.org, use our ballot tools, stay informed. They're wonderful, they're excellent, and hope everyone votes today. And thank you so much for tuning in, and hope you tune in to some of our other great interviews we have planned for today. Thank you again, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate you having me on.